Hey guys, what's up? Sando here. I wasn't a big fan of tube amplifiers before. I've owned quite a few ones, even upper class, from different manufacturers. They all had different sound signatures and quite interesting traits, but those weren't really end game material for me. But that is going to change right now. So today I'm going to review a Trafomatic head-to-headphone amplifier slash preamplifier that completely restarted all my preconceptions about tube amplifiers with its very different sound signature. Okay guys, so let's check what's inside that hood, how it looks, and then how it sounds. Let's go. Head 2 was actually bigger and heavier to what I was expecting. Just look how massive it is. And I believe that those online pictures aren't making it justice. Although it might look like having a fully CNC machined aluminum case, this is actually a plywood structure that was polished and finished with this beautiful matte black color. They do accept custom finishes, and you can certainly unleash your imagination with a one-of-a-kind unit. Its thick and heavyweight plywood structure wasn't picked randomly, as it helps reducing micro vibrations coming from within its tubes. Trafomatic bolted 4 massive feet that have soft foam inlays that will lower remaining vibrations. Lastly, there are 3 huge openings under the unit that are pulling cool air, exhausting it around the Trafomatic logo on top. The wall body is rounded and smooth to the touch, as you can see. It doesn't have pointy edges, and I must say that it started growing on me. As for controls, it has one of the simplest front panels that I've seen in ages. So you have just a 4-pin XLR jack, a 1/4 inch headphone jack, an impedance switch to their left and a volume wheel to their right. On its back you'll find an AC inlet, a pair of RCA and XLR inputs, and the same number of analog outputs, since it can also work as a preamplifier in a stereo setup. As for tech inside it, you know what's funny? I always thought that I'm listening to a hybrid transistor input, tube output hybrid amplifier, because it didn't sound like a traditional tube amplifier to me. So this one is a Class A push-pull tube headphone amplifier and preamplifier that uses a single 6H30P double triode and another ECC88 double triode per channel. In a push-pull amplifier, one tube pushes the output on the positive cycle and another tube pulls the negative half cycle, working in antiphase. The 2 antiphase outputs are connected to the load that causes the signal output to be added and distortion to be subtracted from each other. The benefits of a push-pull amplifier is that it produces more power and less distortion compared to a traditional single-ended design. Head 2 uses an in-house made linear transformer followed by a robust multi-stage voltage filtering from which vacuum tubes are pulling power. It will output 2 watts in 50 ohms on both its headphone jacks, and at first it might seem like a moderate output, but later on that proved to be more than enough for all my headphones. There is just a single gain setting of 26 dB and the output impedance sits at 6 ohms via RCA and 25 ohms via XLR when working as a preamplifier. Alright guys, this is pretty much it, so let's hit some eardrums. I'll start by saying that I had very wrong preconceptions about tube amplifiers. So I believed that the perfect measuring amplifiers, any kind of amplifiers, would be the best sounding amplifiers. I've fallen into that trap many times, and it costed me a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money, and I believe that you've been in there as well multiple times. So I had most, if not really all, perfect measuring instrument grade headphone amplifiers that were using some kind of noise shaping techniques that were, dragging the noise floor into the abyss while elevating signal to noise ratio and micro details as much as possible. All those THX, AAA, NFC amplifiers of topping, PLFC amplifiers of SMSL are using such kind of noise shaping techniques. And nothing is really wrong with such designs. They sound really clean, very detailed, very transparent, like opening my windows towards music. But when you take something from your music, I believe that a chain reaction happens on a deeper level with your music. Even upper class headphone amplifiers like those, like my former benchmark HPA4 was incredibly clean sounding. It was sounding great only with warm sounding headphones like Odyssey LCD4, but everything else was not connecting me with my music. It was quite sterile, quite cold sounding to me. And I also believed that tube amplifiers would be all mellow, soft, gentle, slow sounding, muddy sounding, lacking resolution, rolling off parts of the frequency response, especially at both ends of the spectrum, so the sub bass and the upper treble, but I guess I was well wrong because this one is a very different beast. To me, Head 2 sounded more like an overly excited and explosive sounding all discrete solid state headphone amplifier than like a full tube headphone amplifier. And I know how crazy that sounds, but that's exactly how Head 2 appeared to me. So this is a very linear, very transparent, very mean sounding, very speedy sounding. It covers the frequency response in full, so you get as much sub bass and upper treble as you please. It changed completely my preconceptions about HD800S, so these ones became so impactful, and especially in the sub bass. And if you think that Odyssey LCD4 are very mean sounding and impactful and visceral sounding in there, then wait until you hear the HD800S on the Head 2. It was a very different experience. And I know I've tried quite a few, world-class solid-state headphone amplifiers with HD800S, but none were changing so much this headphone. It was just radically changing everything I knew about them. And the story isn't really stopping at HD800S alone, because all my headphones felt revitalized, dynamics went higher, even compared with some top-tier solid-state headphone amplifiers that I tried before. By the way, I'll be comparing this one with some of the best amps, so please watch until the end. The second surprise was hearing an amazing detail retrieval and transparency. It was easily on the same level with some of the best, solid-state headphone amplifiers. HD800S, Hi-Fi Susvara, LCD4, LCD5, many other headphones were showing me a lot of layers and sub-layers of information, and it was easily on the same level with some of the best amps. So I won't call it uber detailed, but it was certainly very believable and very real sounding to me. The third surprise was experiencing a much bigger scale of my music, and if the nicest solid-state headphone amplifiers were giving me a solid 7 out of 10, then this one was giving me at least a 9 out of 10 soundstage scale. So it was always pushing the sounds outside my head, and it was actually changing some of my headphones, like example LCD5, which mind you are not that great in terms of soundstage, but those were almost great, almost good on this one in terms of soundstage, so that's actually quite amazing. The fourth and last surprise was actually dynamics. From a very small portion of solid-state amplifiers, I was getting the all-inclusive treatment in terms of transients, in terms of speed and impact, but how on earth a simple tube amplifier can get me the same treatment, getting quick shifts in dynamics and just keeping up with my electronica tunes is just beyond my understanding. But there was another final surprise, and that was its majesty, bass slam. If IEMs I'm 23R, Bars and Soloist GT or Ferrum were wielding that Mjolnir hammer single-handedly, then this one was wielding it two-handedly, just swinging left and right with an incredible force and just pounding my eardrums so hard. Later on, I decided using it as a preamplifier in my stereo setup, so putting it in between my Gold Note DS10 Plus and two benchmark HB2 power amplifiers, driving a pair of KEF reference free. Now, I have already used quite a few preamplifiers like Musician Mono Zeros, benchmark HPA4, topping pre 90, but none of them were doing what this one was doing with my setup. Luckily, noise floor didn't go up, so it didn't uppercut all those details and signal-to-noise ratio, so it was very clean, very detailed sounding in my setup, but it was considerably bigger sounding and much more dynamic, much more punchier sounding with my setup. And I know that several people are describing their speakers as with sounds coming from behind their walls, and I wasn't really I didn't understand why they really mean by that, but right now with this one I really understand that because it really sounds like that. Everything was breathing, there was more air, more weight, more music, more emotions, and it really transformed a linear setup into a more joyful sounding one. My loudspeakers already have quite an amazing sub-bass delivery definition. They don't need more rumble and oomph down low, but this one was actually doing that. It was adding more sub-bass definition. And for me, that was not really very beneficial, but I'm sure with some bookshelf loudspeakers, that would be really amazing. In terms of noise floor, I'm not sure what secret sauce Sasha and his team poured over that transformer, power supply, and filtering stages, because clearly this is really a noiseless, very clean sounding headphone amplifier. So I connected the most sensitive IEMs that I have at my disposal on its 1/4-inch headphone jack. I went 25 ohms, the lowest volume, and it was almost dead silent. Almost, only because I could hear that noise only when I was connecting and disconnecting that jack, so it was barely audible. So in my opinion, this is a very noiseless sounding amplifier in a way. All my IEMs worked really no problem. Going louder on that wheel, I didn't detect any kind of trace of noise, let alone a noise floor, so clearly it was made even for some IEMs, if you please. I do not recommend that, but if you want, you can use that one with IEMs. All other headphones, portable headphones, desktop headphones, even the most sensitive ones as Apos Caspian, didn't show me nothing really, so it was completely dead silent, even going much louder, even changing that impedance much higher, so it was always dead silent. What's actually quite interesting is that top-tier solid-state amplifiers like Barson Soloist 3X, like Ferrum were actually noisier than this one, but had to appear clearer, drowning that noise for good completely. As for power output, 2 watts per channel in 50 ohms doesn't sound like an over-powerful amplifier, right? I don't expect it to drive the LCD4, LCD5, let alone the high-performance Susvara. Still at around 11 o'clock position on its volume wheel, it was driving good the LCD5. Not good, but actually great, because they were very alive, very impactful. I simply couldn't believe that, so I've stopped this one. I started comparing it with my other solid-state headphone amplifiers, and after about an hour or two, it was clear to me that this one was bigger sounding and meaner, more impactful. It was like that in the sub-bass, very punchy sounding. So yeah, if you want just an amazing bass delivery and punch and speed, this one is actually better. All other headphones like Odyssey LCD5, Keneton Rocknear, Parasitic Phobos, HD800S were at around 10 and 11 o'clock position on that volume wheel, so I was not even close to reaching half of its power output. All those sounded really amazing, again, impactful, big sounding, very alive, and it had just a limitless headroom remaining on top. A few minutes passed and high-performance Susvara hopped into my hands, and I was telling to myself, this is it, I finally found your Achilles heel, there is no way you can drive this. And 1 minute later, a few questions started hovering outside my head. How this is possible? Is that 6 volts coming from my DAC instead of 4 is causing this? Or is that a powerful output stage? It's Class A working mode? What's really happened? Because it was driving very well the high-performance Susvara to what I would call as just phenomenal. It was easily a 94 out of 100. So it was just amazing sounding with the high-performance Susvara. I had a lot of bass, and the first sign that your high-performance Susvara are not well driven is actually the bass, because if you're not hearing it, meaning that high-performance Susvara is not well driven. But this one had all the bass that I wished, so they worked really nicely. And if you're wondering, I was at around 2 o'clock position with the high-performance Susvara, so again there was quite a big headroom remaining on top. About a third of its power was still remaining, which is great, which is really unexpected actually. I don't think you can crank that volume even higher, so suggesting that it would drive your entire headphone collection, no problem. Moving on to Transient Response, I'm usually getting the speed or the impact. Rarely I'm getting them both, but when that happens, I'm usually looking at a massive, big, heavy, and expensive amplifier, and Head 2 is certainly part of that group. So it was, a mean sounding unit from the start. It was certainly a little meaner compared to the rest of the Class A solid-state Mafia. It doesn't mean that those aren't impactful sounding anymore, it's that this one was actually better at elevating my mood and self-esteem. So when you are powering on this unit, you are instantly forgetting about a boring, flat, or lifeless sound signature of THX AAA amplifiers, of NFC amplifiers, because this one is actually completely different. It doesn't care about the highest signal-to-noise ratio or about the lowest distortion. It does care actually about making you smile, making you feel good while listening to music. That was actually very apparent. Sometimes it feels like I'm listening to unamplified music, hiding all those microphones, speakers, amplifiers behind the curtain. It's complicated describing or telling you exactly what I mean by that, but it's like listening to real music that's effortless, that's unrestrained, like music happens right now, like I'm not listening to representation of my music that happened in the past. Putting aside its bad boy attitude, there was something else that stood out immediately versus other amplifiers, and that was, of course, soundstage depth and scale and all that. So Sennheiser HD800S already big sounding on their own, and they don't need bigger sounding amplifiers, but that was exactly what was happening with the Head 2. It was like listening to a good or well-made near-field stereo setup, something like that, with sounds coming from different altitudes, from different angles, even from behind my back, which was weird at first, but really desirable much later on. I even watched a few movies with the HD800S, and there were a few times when I just checked if somebody entered my room, because it was, too real sounding, with a few sounds just stretching even far away, so something like that, which was unexpected. With solid-state amplifiers didn't sound like that. With all due respect to Odyssey and to their engineers, I believe that LCD5 are not that impressive in terms of soundstage. So always sounding inside my head, claustrophobic, closed in, on stage, call it as you want. But with this one, it was gently and slowly just improving the scale. It was pushing the sounds outside my head. It was making, a better layering. The sounds were going in all directions. So from a bidimensional sounding headphone, it was more like a three-dimensional sounding headphone, coming closer to the LCD4, but not exactly on the same level with the LCD4 in terms of scale. If you enjoy the sound of the LCD5, and of course there are many reasons to like them, but you want a little bigger space in between the notes, you want a better layering, a more holographic experience, then Head 2 seems like a winning ticket for the LCD5. Moving on to cleanness and detail retrieval, from a big number of tube and hybrid amplifiers that I tried before, this one was easily the cleanest sounding of them all, and that shouldn't come as a surprise because it's also the most expensive sounding one. So Hi-fi still sounded as Hi-fi, so nothing was lacking from them. HD800S were pulling a big chunk of information from my tracks, and I'm pretty sure that a big helping hand was coming from that Corday, from that AudioBite Hydravox, that was making it very transparent, clean, and detailed. So of course I could hear everything, every nuance hiding behind my tracks. But most interestingly, what was really nice was its transparency. So I could much easier zoom in, zoom out in a very crowded track. I could focus on that violin player in an orchestra, or maybe on that drum player in a live concert. So that happened very naturally, very easily, without straining myself too much. I have experienced a slightly better detail retrieval with a few solid-state headphone amplifiers, but I don't think I ever heard such a see-through transparency before. Moving on to frequency response, expect the unexpected with the Head 2, especially when it comes to bass. I mean, headbanging on Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven with headphones on your head should never happen, right? But that's exactly what I was doing with HD800S put on Head 2. Those piano notes were just heavier, bolder, and I just couldn't hold myself anymore. So it does bass, and it does it very well. It's very amazing, very defined, clean, very impactful sounding, and if you like electronica and everything that has to do with bass, you should just try out this amplifier. Don't ask me why it sounds so great with electronica. I simply cannot understand how a tube amplifier can sound so mean and impactful and fast, but it does electronica very well. Instead of an overly warm, overly smooth, overly wet, juicy, creamy, or sweet sounding mid-range, I believe that I've got a real or pure representation of the mid-range with just an added weight and texture in a way. So this is not thin, this is not wet, this is not gritty, this is not soft sounding mid-range. It's somewhere in the middle, so it sits on the same level with the bass and treble. It just sounds real, pure, exactly as a human voice is sounding. So the pitch was very right, musical instruments sounded very right from the get-go. There wasn't even a trace of dryness, as everything that appeared on my playlist was putting me instantly into a relaxed state of mind. Its treble performance felt clean, defined, extended without really slashing parts of its upper or lower treble. So I've got cymbals that really shimmered in a natural fashion. I've got powerful snare drum hits that weren't really shy in showing off their true nature. And of course I've got bells that were ringing in a very natural fashion without making me clench my teeth or my ears hurt. So this is not your usual entry-level or mid-level tube amplifier that rolls off parts of the upper treble, because this one is actually very extended in the treble. I decided comparing these three top-of-the-line headphone amplifiers in a comprehensive way, and for that please head over my website and check out my written review below. It's on chapter 10 and it's a comparison that you don't want to miss. Wrapping things up, this one is a phenomenal sounding tube headphone amplifier slash preamplifier. It got an amazing transient response, detailed retrieval, it will be pounding harder compared to solid state amplifiers. They do care for the act of music listening, and you can feel that immediately after trying a few tunes. If you intend on trying some harder loads like Huffman Susvara, HE6, Abyss AB1266, then may I suggest using a DAC that can output a higher voltage, like 5 or 6 volts, because you'll be getting a higher headroom and of course a little bit more power from this one. The only cons that I see with this one is a long burn-in time and lacking a remote control to be used in a stereo setup. Otherwise, this is really an amazing sounding unit, and for all of the reasons combined, I believe that a gold award was fully deserved. Okay guys, a much longer in-depth review can be found below. I've put a lot of time into that one, so please check it out. And as usual, listen to more tunes, be positive, and I'll see you soon. Cheers!